Hydrogen sulphide, H2S, is a highly toxic and flammable gas that is commonly encountered in the oil and gas industry, as well as in other industries such as mining, sewage treatment, and agriculture. Here are some important details that NEBOSH students should know about H2S gas. Properties. H2S is a colorless gas with a pungent odor, often described as smelling like rotten eggs. It is denser than air and can accumulate in low-lying areas such as pits, tanks, and trenches. H2S is highly flammable and can ignite at temperatures as low as 260 degrees Celsius. Health effects. H2S is extremely toxic and can cause a range of health effects depending on the concentration and duration of exposure. At low concentrations, it can cause irritation of the eyes, nose, and throat. At higher concentrations, it can cause headache, nausea, dizziness, and loss of consciousness. Exposure to very high concentrations can result in rapid death. Exposure limits. The occupational exposure limit, OEL, for H2S varies by country and jurisdiction, but is typically in the range of 5 to 10 parts per million, ppm, for an 8-hour workday. Short-term exposure limits, STEL, are often set at 10 to 15 ppm for 15 minutes. However, it is important to note that even exposure to concentrations below the OEL can be dangerous. Monitoring. Employers must monitor H2S concentrations in the workplace to ensure that they do not exceed safe levels. This can be done using personal gas monitors worn by workers, or by stationary monitors placed in work areas. Control measures. There are several control measures that can be used to minimize the risk of H2S exposure, including ventilation, isolation of the source of H2S, and the use of personal protective equipment, PPE, such as respirators. Emergency response. In the event of an H2S release or exposure, it is important to have a well-planned emergency response plan in place. This should include procedures for evacuating the affected area, providing first aid to exposed workers, and notifying emergency services. Overall, it is important for NEBOSH students to understand the properties, health effects, exposure limits, monitoring, control measures, and emergency response procedures related to H2S gas, in order to prevent workplace injuries and fatalities.